Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're going to discuss about basal ganglia, direct and indirect pathways. Basal ganglia is a group of subcortical nuclei which is located at the base of forebrain. Its components are striatum, lentiform nucleus, subthalamic nucleus, and substantia nigra. Putamen and caudate nucleus, collectively known as striatum, putamen and globus pallidus is collectively known as lentiform nucleus. Globus pallidus is divided into two parts: globus pallidus internus, which is located medially, and globus pallidus externus, which is located in lateral part. The functions of basal ganglia is it is very important for voluntary movement. It controls the tone of muscle. It controls the motor reflexes by coordination and integration of visual and labyrinthine systems. So it helps to maintain the posture. It controls the automatic associated movement, for example, swinging your hands while walking or facial expressions while talking. This figure here helps us to localize the structure. This white one is lateral ventricle and third ventricle. This yellow one structure here is caudate nucleus. Below that there is thalamus, and there is lentiform nucleus which is made from this putamen and globus pallidus. In between lentiform nucleus and thalamus there is internal capsule. Below that there is subthalamic nuclei, and below the subthalamic nuclei there is substantia nigra. There is two pathway. One is direct pathway, which is also known as excitatory pathway, and second one is indirect pathway, which is also known as inhibitory pathway. In this diagram, this purple color represents the stimulatory action and this blue one represents the inhibitory action. We know that GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter and glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It may be confusing while reading this direct and indirect pathway, so we should be clear about one concept, that is GABA is inhibitory, glutamate is excitatory. For example, there is one structure A which act upon another structure B. Normally both they produce GABA. GABA is a inhibitory neurotransmitter. So whenever you will stimulate this A, it means it will release more GABA. That is, it will inhibit its action. Now, if this A will act upon this B, this A will release GABA, which is inhibitory in nature. So this will inhibit B. That means it will produce less GABA. Less GABA will be produced by B structure. That is, it will not inhibit, it will disinhibit. In another word, we can say it will activate the structure. So let's learn about the direct pathway. In direct pathway, first of all, there will be cortical input via glutamate. And we know glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter. It will stimulate the striatum to release GABA. Now this putamen will release GABA and it will act upon globus pallidus internus. Normally globus pallidus internus would produce GABA, but this putamen has released GABA, which is inhibitory in action. So it will inhibit the production of GABA in globus pallidus internus. So there will be less GABA. It means it will disinhibit, or it will activate thalamus. Whenever thalamus is activated, there will be increased in motion. Next is indirect pathway. In indirect pathway, there will be cortical input via this glutamate to this putamen. Now this putamen will release GABA and it will act upon globus pallidus externus. Normally it produces GABA, but as GABA has acted upon this globus pallidus externus, it will produce less GABA, which means it will disinhibit or activate our subthalamic nuclei. Whenever this subthalamic nuclei gets activated, it produces glutamate, which act on globus pallidus internus. Normally this globus pallidus internus produces GABA, so this glutamate will excite its function. That means it will produce more GABA and it will inhibit thalamus. So that means it will decrease the motion. So in this figure, in this chart, we can know direct pathway. First of all, there will be cortical input via glutamate. It will act on globus pallidus. First of all, it will act on striatum to stimulate release of GABA. It will inhibit GABA release from globus pallidus internus. Thus, by disinhibiting or activating thalamus, there will be increased in motion. Next is indirect pathway. There will be cortical input via glutamate. It will stimulate GABA release from striatum, which will inhibit GABA release from globus pallidus externus, which means it will disinhibit or activate subthalamic nuclei. Then it will produce glutamate and act on globus pallidus internus. So there will be more release of GABA, which will inhibit thalamus, and there will be decreased motion. There is D1 receptor, which is the direct pathway, and D2 receptor is indirect pathway. The substantia nigra will release dopamine, and it will stimulate the direct pathway, means it will stimulate the excitatory pathway, so there will be increased in motion, and it will inhibit the indirect pathway, that is it will inhibit the inhibitory pathway, so it will activate the motion. So both this by dopamine from this our substantia nigra, it will increase motion by activating direct pathway and by inhibiting the indirect pathway. So this is all for today. I hope you guys understood. In next video we will learn about basal ganglia lesions.